Greetings, mortals, peers, and queers. Welcome to another episode of Late Night Serotonin, where me and a bunch of my guests will collaborate together to talk about issues that we want to go more in depth about and talk about. Most of us are TikTokers, so we want to have the chance to talk longer about stuff, as well as joke, interact, and comment on each other's ideas. I will give all of my guests a moment to introduce themselves after I play a quick selection from hopefully this theme song. We are testing a few things out this episode. Oh, it's not working. There we go.
Of course. I don't think it's coming through.
It's not coming through?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say I don't hear anything.
Oh no! That's so frustrating. Let me turn on.
We should put more time into making this show.
Yeah,
funny.
we should. Let's try that again. One more time. Can you hear it now? No? Okay. All right. We're just going to skip the intro for this time. All right, folks, let's give us all, the audience a round of introductions. Astro, top of the line. Give us an introduction to yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Astro Feminist. I'm typically on TikTok and I post primarily about discussing women's interaction with the patriarchy and just kind of a lot of pro-feminist content. So if that seems like something you'd be interested in checking out, go ahead and check out my TikTok, which will be linked in the comments below.
All right. Gabriel, you're up next.
Hey there. I go by GW Jones on like pretty much every platform. I officially have a Twitter now. But yeah, mainly I'm on TikTok, GW Jones on there. And yeah, I post just a varying material of different political takes and ways that I've found are useful to organize, whether it be your workplace, your housing, or your food, and just general leftist things. So yeah, check it out if you're interested.
All right. Wonderful. And PK.
Hey, I'm PKK Dakota. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and all those good things. I like to post a lot about environmentalism, camping, and voters' rights.
All right. Wonderful. And for the audience who may be joining us for the first time, I'm Lady Avalon. I'm a transgender, lesbian, socialist, polyamorous, atheist. I'm disabled, and I'm a ginger. Find which one of those you find most offensive and post it in the comments below. With that, we'll open up. Today is Labor Day, so I know Gabriel was itching to talk about one of his topics. Go ahead and start us off, my friend.
Oh man, I totally should have saved this.
It's in Backstage General, I believe. That's where you posted it.
Pretty much, let me get this pulled up over here.
Let me go ahead and Discord call. There we go. Support for labor unions in the U.S. is at a 57-year high. That's pretty good.
There we go. Yeah, that's was a big thing that I wanted to bring up today is that as we're seeing more and more unions spring up across the country, it's actually like snowballing. A really big thing that happened was the NLRB rejected Amazon's push to reject their New York warehouse union, and that didn't pass. And that was just like a few days ago. So it's just kind of like a huge victory that we can all celebrate and look towards their success at doing that in similar things. I put out some stuff recently this week talking about the strikes and the efforts people at Taco Bell are starting to make. Now, it's not coming to a full like union vote situation yet, but I really hope that like Starbucks, Taco Bell, and all the other people who work at young brands companies, whether that be like Pizza Hut or KFC, also follows suit with what we're seeing and like actually asking for more at your workplaces by taking over with a union so that you can actually control your environment instead of just putting up with continued abuse by the upper class.
All right, awesome. And to read just a little bit from this article, I want to read this one paragraph because it is heartwarming. 71% of Americans now approve of labor unions, up from last year's 68%. Union support is also up 64% before the COVID-19 pandemic, and is the highest polling firm that has been recorded since 1965. So, damn. Nearly 60 years of a 60-year high. Pretty good. All right. Anyone else have any comments on just how great the labor movement has been as of late? We've seen. I know I recently followed the Starbucks union campaign and how Starbucks has been firing union workers and closing down union stores. But they're still being overwhelmed. Unions for Starbucks are popping up left, right, and center faster than they can be knocked down. And multiple lawsuits have been fired on behalf of the fired the union employees to force Starbucks to hire them back.
It's an interesting thing. If you literally just Google NLRB, you will come up with a lot of information about the multiple cases that are happening across the board with Starbucks, Amazon, and all sorts of customer service and warehouse worker unions that are starting to try to form. And it's just like a constant assault with barely any accountability, really. That's a huge thing that I think has been lacking in how the government like handles unions for a very long time, where companies can kind of just get a slap on the wrist by doing like incredibly terrible illegal things. And even if someone gets rehired, unless an actual union is formed and is able to protect them, they'll get bullied out of their job eventually by the higher ups. Like retaliation happens, even though that's also illegal, so.
All right, wonderful. And did anyone have any other comments, or do we want to jump onto a different topic?
I think that I think a lot of this union support is coming from things like TikTok that allow people to spread their message like wildfire, and people can kind of see what's happening, what it's about. Because I've learned a lot about unions and the labor union movement through TikTok and following these pages that are pro-union, especially the Starbucks union page. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but yeah, I just think that the way that they have gotten their message out has helped garner them so much support. So I think that's kind of a benefit to social media, despite a lot of its drawbacks. But
all right.
Was there any progress on that that case that you have up on this?
Yeah, the Keffels. Kiwifarms. As an update from our last week's episode, yes, Kiwifarms has been officially kicked off the internet. Their supporter, CloudShare, eventually decided to drop them because for a number of reasons. One, Keffels was getting international support in her campaign to knock Kiwifarms down. But also, Kiwifarms, in their blind, unreasoning hatred, I heard they decided to go and fuck with people's money. And not only did Kiwifarms go down, but also the owner of Kiwifarms, Joshua Moon, also hosted a website for neo-Nazis, and that has also been knocked down as an unintended result of Kiwifarms being dropped. So this is really good news. They absolutely did it. They just won massively. And Keffels has put out words, quote tweeting or talking about the trans people who were harassed into suicide by Kiwifarms, and leaving messages like, "We did it. I hope your soul can rest." And honestly, good for them. Um, you know, I first learned of Keffels because they got really famous for doing, Twitter dunks, and people thought that that wasn't real activism. But what it ended up doing is she built a lot of momentum online across a lot of different spheres, that she was so well known that when this happened, she was able to launch a massive, unprecedented campaign to knock down an entire website off the internet for being hateful, for being venomous, and just a scourge on society, and successfully managed to do so. It was great.
I think I've talked about that on previous panels, but that's always something that I always think is really cool about how technology is moving forward. Is like, although, like corporations and capitalism and the cops and like governments will abuse what they can do with technology, it is also a tool that the working class and LGBTQ and like civil rights movement, and there's like all these things across the board that can also use it to their benefit. And it's really important to like not forget about that. I feel like a lot of people disparage others for saying like that someone's like a keyboard warrior. And yeah, I mean, if you're just complaining and not actually transitioning it into real action, yeah, it's just kind of dumb. But I've found more often than not, in the long run, if someone's really serious about what they're doing, and people can often see that, and that's why they'll gain such a following, they'll actually be able to have a very big impact on the world from sitting online.
All right, awesome. Any final thoughts from the rest of the panel on that before we move on to our next topic?
Just good job. I'm glad we could make the internet just a little bit better of a place.
Agreed. Astrofeminist, did you have something you wanted to talk about this week?
Sure. I think that the student loan forgiveness, I kind of wanted to discuss a little bit about that. And I also wanted to kind of talk about I think you already know where this is going, the backlash it has received from, a certain party that we don't necessarily align with. But I just, it's funny that there's this push to forgive student loans for people seeking higher education, and Republicans obviously are going to be against that because they're convinced to accept being neglected by their representatives, not only being neglected, but to accept blatant hypocrisy from them as well. PPP loans that they happily accepted being forgiven, there was no problem there. But when it comes to the average working class American trying to make a better life for themselves, sorry, my cat's in the just to become better people, all of a sudden, no, we can't pay for that. So, and I just think it's kind of there's so much hypocrisy and irony surrounding it, because these are the same people that advocate for people, who may not have a good paying job, or advocate against minimum wage. They tell them to learn a skill, go to college, do all these things to just get a better job, as if that's a viable solution to the problem. Then when it comes to actually creating the means to get an education to get that better job, they have to make them suffer as much as possible. And it's this idea that Republicans believe that they need to suffer in order to be anywhere remotely successful, I guess. I'm not sure where the logic is there, but that everything has to be as hard as it possibly can for it to be respectable. So.
Thoughts from around the panel?
Oh yeah, you go for it.
Oh, I was saying, like, that's happening a lot in North Carolina. Their lawmakers on the right side are trying to figure out if there's a way that they can tax people that get any loan forgiveness, to either make them pay hundreds or thousands of dollars up front, or to pretty much take their entire tax rebate the next year away. And I know a lot of that stuff is being discussed in other Republican-controlled states. I'm just sitting here thinking, like, it's not like they're getting money. They're just getting money forgiven. So I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. But the fact that they're even trying to find a way to do that is just like, just let good things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Something kind of jumping off of that is there's a story that's kind of bouncing around that I've shared in the message for like the Discord VC here, but it's that Republicans are looking to possibly challenge this in court, which is just like, if you're gonna go sue the government to like stop them from, like, it's just so crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
like how
that,
they work.
they're gonna shoot themselves. I mean, if you want to look real fucking bad from the American people, like, go for it, I guess. But it's always funny whenever anything even slightly progressive passes, and like seeing their huge reaction to it. It's like once people actually get handed something like that, it's, you're gonna look terrible. Like the optics are terrible if you're gonna go against that. You know what I mean? Because then it's like puts the Republicans in a position where they have to just straight up be like, oh yeah, like we for sure are going to physically take money from your pockets. Like what PK was saying, I bumped into some stuff about that where like taxes were gonna like try to be applied to it, and it's just like it's it's gonna, like, people are gonna figure out it's Republicans doing all this terrible shady shit. So
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're trained to work against their best interest. Like no matter what their representatives say, they just go with it regardless. Like they have to defend every single thing that their representatives say or push for. They have to rationalize it somehow, and it's just it boggles my mind. I don't get it.
I actually have a little bit of insight to that. And it's because it's not about principled positions. You know, leftists will bite basically every bullet ever thrown at them. And whenever you ask them, well, why do you believe what you believe? They're going to cite some 200-year-old, like, economy text or philosophy text that, you know, you need at least 4 PhDs to parse. And they'll go, this is why I believe what I believe. But you know, you look over across the pond at Republicans in MAGA, and they're just like, "Yeah, I did it because I want to trigger the libs. I just want to make them angry." Because their politics is less about positions and principled, like moral positions, than it is about power. It's all about power and maintaining that power. So, you know, to win the culture war, you know, they'll punch down on poor people and go, "Oh, your loans can't be forgiven. If you take out a debt, you have to pay it." And then, you know, we get to see a real lovely bit of pettiness out of the White House as the White House starts quote tweeting all of them and listing exactly how much money of their PPP loans have been forgiven. And they don't care. It doesn't faze them. Their hypocrisy is not important to them. Hypocrisy is not an important thing to them. It is only a cudgel they can use against the other team. Because to them, it's just about power. It's just about partisan politics. That's why, you know, and I'm not saying this not so much about the average Republican voter, maybe, but the hardcore MAGA crowd, and especially the politicians who don't care. They're unscrupulous. You know, I remember there was this wonderful little piece written a while back about how the anti-Semitic doesn't care about what words they use. And essentially it talked about how people on the right, broadly, they will say whatever collection of words they think will allow them to get a victory, even if those collection of words are mutually contradictory. Even if their positions are like logically against each other, it doesn't matter. All that matters is winning the initial fight and gaining more power. And, you know, that can come in a couple of different flavors. You've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I don't think is smart enough to be duplicitous. I think they are just a genuinely, like, mentally deranged person who has managed to get a lot of power. And then you've got people who are like Mitch McConnell, you know, these older Republicans who are sort of riding the Trump wave to victory. Those are the ones I consider dangerous because they're smart enough to actually know that they're lying, and they don't care. Of course, it comes down to personal opinion. Which one do you think is more offensive? Someone who genuinely believes all of the deranged and harmful stuff that they shout, you know, who is too stupid to understand that they are all the things they accuse their enemy of being, or someone who is smart enough to understand all that, does it anyway because they think they're going to win. I don't know. That's down to personal preference.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect. I know that one creator I was talking to was explaining like psychologically what's going on. Like when they get their loans forgiven, they say it's because I earned it because I worked hard. Of course they should be forgiven because I'm better than the poor people that aren't working hard enough. And they actually buy their own bullshit. So they're kind of just like, well, why wouldn't I get mine forgiven? Of course I should. Look at me. And then they look at the people that aren't as affluent as them as like, well, you deserve to have all this debt because you should work harder. And they're raised in households where their parents had money. So they just literally don't have any other lived experience other than I've been handed all this stuff and told I work hard, so therefore it must be true. And everyone else is just not working as hard as I am.
Yeah, they genuinely hate poor people. And I think that kind of ties into that whole racially motivated aspect of it, where you know, people of color are obviously disadvantaged. Working today, disadvantaged when it comes to that kind of thing. So they're going to be overwhelmingly more struggling. So that's what they use to justify racism against them and stuff like that. So
Yeah, certainly, you know, the unfortunate thing, you know, it's why, you know, you see the average Republican voter, both as a danger and also as a tragedy. You know, they've been lied to so consistently that, you know, they're functionally detached from reality. There is what is it, like 35% of the country right now that genuinely believes the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen, and no amount of evidence can pull them out of that because no amount of evidence got them into that. It's just fear based. You know, that it reminds me of that study I read years ago that showed that conservatives tend to be like more emotionally driven than liberals. They tend to be more fear and anger based in their decision making than otherwise found in other voters, in independents and liberals. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you if it's like the systems of conservatism that make someone dumber. I think it is that, you know, conservatism teaches you to stop thinking critically, teaches you to stop engaging rationally with the world around you, because once you do that, it's a lot easier for them to ply you into their positions, to make you a useful idiot for them. Which is, you know, just tragic. People are being used and conned to make just a very few people very powerful and very rich.
aka licking the boot.
Mm-hmm.
Something I wanted to bring up that you mentioned earlier is about how a lot of leftists will point to old theory, but something I've noticed a lot more frequently in leftist spaces, which I think is actually really cool, is like new forms theory and people taking things from our world today and proving like socialism and communism to be good things by um, like just our world. Like you can look around yourself and realize that if workers take over the means of production, it's just better. And there's instances of this happening like all over. So it's just one of those things that like, although you will bump into a few leftists who really like theory, and theory is fun. Like I don't have a PhD and I've read like a ton of books on the stuff, but at the same time, I always encourage people to just look at, like their surroundings and try to do like some basic math. It really isn't as hard as I feel like a lot of people put it to, like where the concept of communism from each to their abilities and to each what their needs are. I'm
from each according to their ability to each according to their need.
My brain is just having a terrible time tonight. I don't know why.
It's all right.
Yeah, you just walk through. It just makes sense of like how to be human. Is like do the best you can and give to people what they need. Like that's just like that's the instinct within all of us. And so it's not that hard to actually walk people through like getting active in your community to organize and start making that stuff a reality for yourself and the people in your community.
Absolutely. We're going to move this over here, and I wonder if I move this over here, can it be seen? It can be. Wonderful. I didn't think we'd manage that, but I like it. All right. I wanted to move on to the topic I wanted to talk about tonight. Can I get that all in there? Can I? Not quite. Well, we'll have to just go with most of it. With all the arguments over whether MAGA Republicans are fascist, I reread William Shire's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich to see how much the rise of Hitler and the rise of MAGA smell similar. Conclusion, they do. This thread is a list of 10 ways. Please take a look. Number 1. The big lie about treachery is used to foment resentment. For the Nazis, we didn't really lose World War I. It was a stab in the back by the Jews and other November criminals. MAGA, we didn't really lose the 2020 election. It was a steal by politicians and blacks in big cities. Number 2. There's an obsession with purity. By the way, all of you can jump in at any one of these points. It's a 10-point thing, so you can jump in at any time. Number 2. There's an obsession with purity culture. Nazis. Race mixture was a threat to the Aryan culture, Hitler wrote. MAGA. The Great Replacement Theory says immigrants threaten white culture. And we know people like Tucker Carlson have been repping. Let me move that slightly over. Have been repping the Great Replacement Theory for a while now. I think it was mentioned like 400 times over the span of a couple of weeks on his show. It's insane.
Wasn't there something that they were voting against interracial marriage, like to repeal that?
Oh yeah,
yeah, they're going to open it up.
Yeah, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas wanted to turn over Griswold, Obergefell, and Lawrence, but he didn't want to overturn Loving v. Virginia, which is the one about interracial marriage. Why? Well, maybe it's because he's a part of a interracial marriage, but all of the other personal rights and freedoms people get, those can go by the wayside. But his personal rights, civil rights for me, not for thee, seems to be the rule of the SCOTUS.
And you can see the physical violence that stuff like Great Replacement Theory has caused, like with the Buffalo mass shooting. That was like the huge thing that in that person's like manifesto that they cited of why they drove across state lines to go and murder people specifically because of their race. Mm-hmm. Like that was extremely driven by that. And also a big thing to point out, like I grew up in Evanston, which is right next to Skokie and Highland Park. And when there was that like pro-MAGA person there, like that 100%, he was a meme lord and a troll like from 4chan or whatever. But at the same time, like, I can't not believe that that was motivated by anti-Semitism, because I know that area very well, and it is a very large Jewish population there. And so, like, MAGA people will just hate the populace in a general sense, because it's a lot of the culture in that area. And so, like, going out and doing a mass shooting based on all that stuff that you get fed from QAnon or like Tucker or just like all those conservative sources, it's like a real impact we see in our daily lives of people just getting straight up unalived by MAGA alt-right people because of these kind of insane theories.
Supremacy, let's just call it what it is.
Mm-hmm. Number 3. Chaos is something to be exploited, not addressed. So for the Nazis, economic distress is a great political opportunity. And for MAGA, economic distress is a great political opportunity. We see this with the Inflation Reduction Act, all of the Republicans were against that, when the oil companies were charging exorbitant prices for gas and oil, even though they were unaffected by the war in Ukraine because none of the trade embargoes had hit oil and gas. They did it anyways to make record profits. And when Democrats proposed bills to knock that shit off and to make it easier for the average voter, Republicans blocked it because it's easier for them to run and saying, oh, Joe Biden made the gas prices go up. And so they didn't want the problem actually solved before they'd run their campaigns on that position, before they'd fought that bit of the culture war. They didn't want the problem solved. They just wanted the talking point.
Yeah, I remember when the gas prices first started going up, oil was at an all-time low as far as how expensive it was. It was literally just so oil makers could reap profit, and they knew Joe Biden would get the blame for it because, people don't understand economic too good.
Unfortunately. Number 4. The super rich bankrolled the right-wing seizure of power. For the Nazis, thanks to IG, Farben, Deutsche Bank, Thyssen, and Krupp, etc. For MAGA, thanks to Mercer's, Unihellens, DeVos, and Thiel, etc. So we see a lot of a handful of rich people. Have you guys actually heard the story of how the guy who's behind the appointments of 3 Supreme Court justices just got $1.6 billion in the single largest political donation in history in the U.S.? Essentially, this billionaire sold his company to a nonprofit that was owned by this dude who is responsible for getting, who's been like the top advocate over the past couple of decades for getting super conservative Supreme Court justices on the court. And basically he got a donation of $1.6 billion to play with. Wild.
Yeah,
shit.
that's one of the things I always look at, because whenever a Republican points the finger and says this about the other side, like I remember when everyone's like, oh, the corporate elite, the elite Democrats, they're all the millionaires, and I'm sitting here watching them do shit like this and going on like open secrets and fact-checking sites where it's like, oh yeah, Target gives to Republican candidates 70% more than Democrats. I'm like, everyone gets mad if they give the Democrats 10,000, yet they're giving the Republicans 100,000 and calling it the same thing.
Yeah, that goes
And getting
with the age-old phrase, every accusation from a Republican is actually a confession.
looking at the John Fetterman finances, he has raised, I think it was like 15 million on small donations from like just individuals. And if you look at Oz, it's mostly donations upwards of $5,000 where he's raised all his money. And there were several Wall Street firms that had maxed out the max a single person can give at like 20,000. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's obviously one for the people and then one for the corporates.
Number 5. Some people think the fascist threat is overblown. The Nazis, while Hitler posed a major threat, some said that he ceased to be a political danger, while 2 weeks later he was chancellor. For MAGA, while Trump poses a major threat, many people think it's just politics and no worries. This, I think, goes into the fact that a lot of people didn't take Donald Trump seriously. Both in the 2016 election and they really only started to take him seriously after his presidency with the 2016 presidential election. And even still, it wasn't until that wonderful speech Biden gave a little bit ago where he described how the Republicans had actually finally fully moved over to MAGA and fascist leanings, that they were against the law and that they, you can't be pro January 6th and pro law. They weren't taking the threat of fascism and the threat of Republicans seriously. I've said before, and this might be a controversial opinion, every Republican who has broken the law and, tried to do a sedition by advocating for January 6th or defending it or defending the big lie or repping the big lie, they should get arrested for that. Throw them in jail. Fuck them. Take them out of power. They are a threat to democracy, and they do not... Anyone who is a threat to democracy does not deserve a place at the table.
Exactly.
It's kind of one of those things where people argue against that and say it's like accelerationist because there's going to be violence done by the right. But it's like... It's kind of like one of those things where, like, so if you get like a stab wound and there's something still in you, like a piece of whatever, you don't want to like pull it out, in a bad circumstance. And so I understand like being tactical about what you're doing and not just like pulling like a steak out of yourself if you're in the middle of the woods. Once you get to the hospital, they need to do surgery, and so they're going to take that steak out of you, and like you might start bleeding. But if you are in a circumstance where you have the tactical advantage of being in a hospital, it's better actually in that circumstance to pull the stick out, and yeah, it's going to bleed a lot for a second, but then like you're actually able to fix the problem versus like I feel a lot of times people's like want to be kind of nice and just like cordial with Republicans. It's like, well, we're bleeding out currently. Like mass shootings continue to happen. These terrorist organizations continue to form. Like more and more bad things are going to keep happening if we keep just like playing nice. And I'm not for like trying anything dumb, but like what you're suggesting with putting a lot of people in prison, it's like, I'm a prison abolitionist. I don't believe that prison should be a thing, but it's always kind of my joke with anyone who's more like centrist on that position, or more like, I don't know, like I don't know what word to use for that, but anyone who's in favor of there being prisons is like, well, if we're going to have them, like, why don't we fucking use them? It's kind of the same thing as I see like a lot of like the police force or like the military. It's like, why we're letting like little fascists in our country while we have these kind of authoritarian forces. It's like, we're going to have them, we should use them. And then everyone's like, oh, we shouldn't use them. And it's like, so then why do we have these things if we're not going to use them? You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'm a big advocate for using every broken system we have to make the world better. Like if we have prisons, and I have my serious problems with prisons, and I think they need to be massively overhauled from the ground up to be more humanitarian, more reformist, and better. However, that's not going to stop me from sending Trump to jail. That wouldn't stop me from sending, most Republican politicians to jail because of the January 6th and the big lie and the sedition. Like, I don't want them to get away with just a slap on the wrist, because if they do an insurrection, if they try to overthrow our democracy, and all they get is maybe the lightest slap on the wrist, or at worst, they get nothing. What's to stop them from trying again? What's to stop them from taking another swing? You know, that's terrifying. As a trans person myself, you know, Trump and MAGA are a threat to people like me, and a threat to my people. You know, they're a danger to the entire country, but they're genocidal to trans people. And then after trans people, gay people, queer people, and everyone else. You know, I'm not gonna say that, you know, I'm alone in the threat, but I want the threat to our democracy completely removed. I want them removed from power. I want them removed from office. I want them removed from the chance for running for office ever again. You know, I want the threat ended. You know, be swift, strike fast, strike hard, make no apologies. Once we, you know, give the country like 2 decades to cool off under, you know, democratic rule, maybe then they can try their ideas. But like, it's one of the reasons why I really liked that recent speech from Biden about how he described how, yes, the Republican Party has turned towards fascist leanings. And, well, you know, we can argue that if they always had that or not, they've become a lot more explicit and a lot more emboldened in the last couple of years. And I'm happy to see people like Biden, the most liberal to ever liberal, actually turn to our side. And, you know, they're starting to stretch, the Democratic Party is starting to stretch itself a little bit thin here, because they're trying to scoop in disaffected Republican voters, but they're also trying to sustain like the support of the left as well. And so we're seeing things like the cancellation of $10,000 of student debt, you know, and we're seeing movement towards good public policies, and suddenly the Democrats are finding, oh, when we do things that are good, people like that, and we become more popular. Ain't that wild? I think we are finally reaching the breaking point where the Republicans are bad enough that even the Democrats are not going to be giving them endless second chances. And, you know, prior to this, you know, the big problem the left had with Democrats is that the right would do something horrible and, you know, against the law or something like that. You know, they would encroach on the fortifications of democracy, and Democrats would go, oh, that's rude, you shouldn't do that, and then wouldn't actually enforce any consequences. I don't think the Democrats are doing that anymore. I think the Democrats are finally going to start fighting the Republicans for real this time. And that's incredibly heartening to see. And I think that is the perfect opportunity for the left to surge inward and be like, yes, Biden did cancel $10,000 of student debt. Look how helpful that is. He should cancel the rest of it. Yes, they got this massive climate change bill pushed through. We should do more. That's a fraction of what we need to do. We need to be more aggressive. And we need to push and push and push to show liberals like, hey, look at how awesome the world gets and how much better the world gets when you start doing even partial leftist policies. See, if we take one step, you walk with me, we can take another step, and we can just keep going into a better world. And I think the Republicans, not exactly doing us a favor, but strategically, because the Republicans are so bad, they're not going to be able to pull any Democrats or independents over to them. So this is the time for the left to pull as many people to our cause as possible.
I think a lot of what we're seeing now from Democrats is kind of the situation of if a tree falls and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a noise. Because as someone that's followed politics for pretty much since I was like 15, this is really nothing new to me and other people. Like, we're all looking around like, oh, I'm glad everyone's finally watching.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I think we're also seeing them be more direct about it because there is this surge of support from leftists. Like we've seen Kansas and traditionally deep red areas are now flipping and they're voting more against Republicans than for Democrats. So we started losing like the majority after Obama was elected. We quickly lost that supermajority, and we've been losing the Senate and the House slowly as they got more and more Republicans in power. And now that they see a chance for a Democratic supermajority again, they're like, look what we can do if we had the majority. Look what we can do when we have the votes, when we have the lawmakers that are more beholden to the people than their own interest. Like it's kind of like they're peacocking and showing that what they could do. And a lot of the policies I looked at, Truth Finder, is it Truth Finder or Truth Fact or whatever? One of the fact checking websites has like a tracker on Biden's promises. He's delivered on 21 of his promises. He's only failed on one. That's because it didn't make it out of the Senate, which is still Republican controlled. So I think it's like all the stuff like we see him doing is just going to be magnified if we vote this November and give him that supermajority he needs to just kind of say, you know what, we don't have to work across the aisle with fascists. They can either go with us or go the way of the dodo.
All right. Number 6. There's a cult of personality. The Nazis, the German army made a pledge of loyalty to Hitler personally. And for MAGA, Trump's supporters bill him as the most moral president in U.S. history. Have you ever heard a more ridiculous claim? More evidence of just how intensely detached from reality they really are. You know, that makes me think of back in 2015, 2016, when Trump made the claim that he could walk down Main Street of New York and shoot someone, and people would have no problem with it. I have no doubt about this nowadays. None. Everyone thought he was, boasting over the top. He could definitely do that nowadays. I think his cult is strong enough now. He could absolutely have people killed, and they would cheer him on. They would find any excuse. Go ahead.
The fact that he's like billions of dollars in debt and no banks will help him out at this point, and I think he's effectively was planning on doing something like that. Just, not as like open as like walking out with a gun, but like he had documents on like assets around the world of the United States, and I'm like against like imperialism and stuff like that. But it's like at the same time, like he was intending to sell this stuff to foreign entities for money, like for sure. Like it just makes sense. Like he's not that smart when it comes to business. Like all of his business dealings are just like a 5-year-old trying to play Monopoly. It's like sarcastically dumb how bad he is at these things. So it's like one of those things where I don't even feel like that's a conspiracy theory. I just feel like that's like that tracks with 100% of how he's done his business dealings forever. It's like anything that he could put his hands on that he thinks he could sell to anyone, he just like grabs it. And so like of course he has like nuclear documents he like who knows about like what was even in there, but the one thing for sure that I've heard constantly over and over again was the fact that there's names and locations of people, and that's like huge for his buddies in Russia.
Like
or Saudi Arabia.
There was a brief news story where his ex-wife turned up dead. It was in the news cycle for like a day, and no one has talked about it since. That his ex-wife just mysteriously died, and now no one's talked about it.
Yeah, they buried her, I believe, on Mar-a-Lago property.
I heard that she had been buried there. I didn't know that she died mysteriously.
That was so. I heard
it was like out of nowhere.
They were trying to get something, and this is why they put her on his golf course is they were trying to get some tax breaks for it being like a cemetery.
Oh yeah, that I did know about. God, that is the slimiest thing. Like burying
Yeah.
your ex-wife in a shallow grave just to be like, all right, I want the tax benefits for my fucking resort. So it'll double as a
I
cemetery.
don't know if I can find this right now, but there was something I want to say from like Sam Cedar or something like that, talking about how embarrassing it would be for him actually, because in a lot of other cultures, like ex-wives, even if they're not like your current wife, like leaders from all over the world, from like kind of right-wing fascist places, like would have large, mausoleums built to their ex-wives. And when he has people over to his golf course to entertain them, there's like a dirt pile over there, and that's kind of like he pretends like he's this rich person, but then like it just has like a pile of dirt, and it's like kind of, I mean, as far as like flexes go, he never really does real flexes. He does like what I feel like what a child would imagine what rich people do, but I don't think he's ever really done what real rich people do. It's strange where he always claims he has all this money, but it's hard to ever like believe how much he actually has. I think he has an enormous amount of debt, but I don't think he actually has much. You know what I mean?
All right, number 7. Christianity is used to legitimize the movement. For the Nazis, the party stands for positive Christianity, end quote. And MAGA, Trump is described as the chosen one, protecting American Christianity. I think we can all have comments on that.
I'm mainly just remembering when there was peaceful protest a little bit away from the White House, and he had those people like tear gassed and beaten, so he could go up and take a picture in front of the church with holding the Bible.
And he was holding it fucking upside down in the weirdest way possible. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
and
that.
he's just, and then he left. He was there for like 5 minutes.
That was so. It's so. He was holding the Bible like he's allergic to it. Like, he's not even good at the propaganda of being a fascist. He's so utterly incompetent, he can't even do the propaganda good.
That's probably the first time he'd held a Bible, to be honest.
Yeah, probably. I don't think he's ever read the book or any book.
If
Can
he could
you?
read, I'd be amazed.
Have you ever seen the fucking, he's always going on about how smart he is and how many books he's read, but like all of his actual notes are written in bold and very simple text. And, writers have gone over his speeches. He speaks like an 8th grader at an 8th grade level. That's what all his speeches level out to. And he'll often speak in grammatically incorrect ways just so that he can sound more emotional or stronger for each sentence. Like, the reasoning going on in his head is not particularly complex.
Speaking to his base, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the ACLU actually took the people to court over that instance of the cops like assaulting people and going against their rights. And there was a motion to dismiss it, which was appealed by the ACLU actually in May of this year. Like, this is still kind of going on.
Oh.
The government succeeded to say that they would do a lot of stuff and enable like all these kind of policies they're going to enact, which like cops never fucking follow. Like, time and time again, judges will order police to do certain things, like over and over again in the Portland protests, where cops like told not to use tear gas or bullets, and like literally just like within the next 24 hours they'd violate these judgments. And so it's just like cops literally have no accountability. But yeah, that's still going on. And the ACLU actually took that up as a thing to go after. Just another good thing to always consider if you're donating to someone. ACLU is a good spot to throw some money if we're going to throw it somewhere.
All right. Number 8. We're getting close to the end here, folks. Books are the enemy. For Nazis, any book that, quote, acts subversively on our future, end quote, must be burned. And for MAGA, I think that we should throw these books in a fire, says Virginia school board member. That makes me think of the time where Florida defunded an entire library because the library refused to throw out one queer book. One queer book, and they decided to defund the entire library.
I forget exactly what state it was, but
It was
I want to say
Florida?
it was like Nebraska or Oklahoma or something like that. Maybe it was even Iowa. Just recently, a teacher got fired for letting their student, or I think they quit because there was this whole thing of like they were going to probably get in trouble or whatever for doing this. They just gave their students a QR code to the Brooklyn Library. Because
oh yeah, I remember that.
All the books in their place, and the teachers are not teachers, but like the parents of like some of these conservative like families like went after them with the school board and everything, which is just nuts. Like they didn't force the kids to go do it. It wasn't like a homework assignment. It was just like, here is something that's free and accessible to the public. Like it wasn't anything illegal that they were doing. Like the Brooklyn Library is okay with what she was sharing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's just like one of those terribly gross things that like conservatives, I feel like, always have to like make themselves a victim of any circumstance, because like they're not allowed to oppress others. Like it's oppression against them. It's just goofy.
Yeah. It was an awful situation. The teacher shared the QR code to the library's list of banned books in the state, and you could read them for free. And conservatives got mad about that. It's like, no, you can't be showing the kids queer literature. You can't be showing anything that has to be doing with the LGBTQ. You can't be showing anything with black history, with people of color's history. That wouldn't make us look good.
How dare you make us look bad?
Yeah. How dare you tell people exactly what we've done? That makes us look bad. All right. Number 9. An independent news media is the enemy of the people, or is the enemy. For Nazis, any newspaper that, quote, offends the honor and dignity of Germany, end quote, must be banned. And for MAGA, the press is the enemy of the people. We've seen so many examples of that. Trump's hate. We just touched on that with that last joke. How dare you tell people the things that we've done? That makes us look bad. I have conservative family and friends who, I'll mention like a pretty neutral news source, something like NPR or PBS or, the BBC, and they'll go, oh, that's biased. What do you mean that's biased? It talks bad about Trump. Well, there's not a lot of other ways to talk about him accurately. You report on all of his crimes, you report on all of his lies. Yeah, reality does tend to have a left-wing bias. It does tend to have an anti-Trump bias because they are detached from reality and they would rather lie.
Yeah, I don't know how you would positively or objectively report on the things that Trump has done without it seeming kind of bad.
Exactly. Number 10, the final one. Educators are pressured to be politically compliant. For Nazis, the teachers took an oath to be, quote, be loyal and obedient to Adolf Hitler, end quote. And for MAGA, Florida's DeSantis accuses teachers of indoctrination and pressures them to avoid references to America's racist history and LGBTQ people. Every single point, every time we talk about this, it just sort of builds and builds on it. Florida defunding an entire public library because it refused to remove queer literature from its shelves. Ron DeSantis on a war against teachers and queer people in Florida because he wants to run for president in 2024. We know that's going to happen. And fun fact, from the rumblings I've seen, not only are Mitch McConnell and Trump beefing right now, but Trump's afraid of Ron DeSantis. And honestly, we all should be too. Ron DeSantis is got all of Trump's heinous political positions, but he's a lot smarter than Trump. And that makes him much, much more dangerous. But it would be cool if they run side by side and end up splitting the party. Because then that gives us a better chance of winning. So here's hoping they get into a messy fight.
I think it'll be much the same way as 2015 went, where like Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, all the biggest Trump supporters now are calling him like a liar, saying that you can't trust him as far as you can throw him. He's a psychopath. He's a lunatic. They all said that about him right up until he was inaugurated, and then all of a sudden they just fell in line.
Mm-hmm.
Bootlickers are surprisingly good at just falling in line.
They like money. It's money, money, money.
Money and power.
Give them more money.
All right.
It's like a wacky thing that Trump's done. I honestly wonder how long it's going to last, because it's just like, I saw an article about how a lot of Trump's donations and like sources of them have been drying up. Like he's abused his people too much. He's kind of sucked them dry. Like the donation style that the Trump campaign uses is so like terrible, and they've gotten sued over it multiple times, of like doing fraudulent things with like how they would draw money from people's bank accounts. Yeah.
So back in the day, like I used to be like on the right and stuff, and I would get those emails, and like they would get aggressive, like, you're the reason that we haven't passed this yet, or you're like blaming the person they're sending the email to, and it's just like, this is kind of aggressive, like, chill. And yeah.
So yeah, that was just something that like, it's not going to last forever for him. Like, he's literally, there's people like driving their lives into the ground for Trump, but it's like, you can't sustain yourself forever. It's like putting your job and following him around the country. And so it's just like one of those things that it's like burning the candle on both ends. I feel like a lot of conservatives do things for short-term gains, but like it doesn't work in the long run. And we just all got to keep surviving and keep pushing for like anti-fascist stuff whenever we have the opportunity to do that, and we'll beat them, because they don't, like, fascism never wins at the end of the day. That's something to always remember, is like there's enough good people in the world. There's like that speech, kind of in reference to what we're looking at here, but from Charlie Chaplin in the I think it's called like The Great Dictator. At the end of the movie, Charlie Chaplin goes into, like, after like satirizing Hitler the whole time, goes into just like a speech about humanity and being humanitarian, and like how one of the great quotes from like that speech was like, as long as men die, like, liberty will reign. It's like the kings will always die, and that's something that's always important to remember. It's just like, it's such a small portion of humanity that like holds the top percent. Like, they don't live forever, and like we can keep pushing, and eventually things will get better.
Humanity. There's one thing that is true. It's the fight for democracy is a never-ending one. It's not a show up once every 4 years type of thing. It's a show up every primary, show up every election. Like, make sure we're always applying that pressure. And I think that we're in this situation was kind of like the regression of voting in 2012 and 2016. because a lot of those minority voices were able to gerrymander and kind of cheat their way into power. And as soon as they got that platform, all we've heard ever since, every time they lose, now that people are showing back up to the polls, are, well, we're cheated, well, we're this, they're oppressing us. If we have to have this system, or all those millions of people in California and New York, they'll control everything.
Yeah, we saw the most recent example of this. Ranked choice voting was implemented in Alaska, and the second Sarah Palin lost, suddenly they were bitching and moaning about how, oh, it's a scam, they've cheated us, it's not real, please give us back the win. And they've lost.
Even Republican primaries, like Republicans that lose to other Republicans now are claiming that they're being cheated.
I was literally about to bring that up. It was the lady who was running for the Arizona Republican primary for governor had a huge breakdown. Hope everyone's okay outside my place. That was a loud bang. But yeah, like they're just claiming that the Republicans like weighed the primary against her, and it's like, this is gonna work out great. Y'all keep doing that within your own party. Like, if you're gonna do it for major elections, do it for yourselves too. I'm all for Republicans trying to burn down their own primaries. That's gonna work out great for everyone.
Mm-hmm. What I'm not a fan of is fucking Democrats giving money to far right candidates to fund their campaigns, so that hopefully they're supposedly easier to fight in the general. Not a fan of the Democrats doing that. I think they should stop. That is a strategically dumbass decision.
I like the arguments that I hear in favor of people doing or them doing that is like that it adds to like the ability of Democrats to win, but something that I think has overall caused like the rise in fascism in our country is platforming those things. Even when they're a minority, it allows like the pipeline of fascism to be open to the younger generation. It's like what people talk about with like YouTube having like the alt-right pipeline of people watching the suggested video, and then you watch the suggested video. And I've seen multiple like sociology like professors like do studies on this kind of thing, looking at how easy you can make a brand new YouTube account and just watch a few videos that aren't even that political, but just in the right zone of YouTube, and all of a sudden everything you're going to be getting is like Andrew Tate stuff, or like Yiannopoulos stuff, or like the freaking crazy like woke moralists guy, or whatever his name is. I'm freaking blanking out on that too right now.
The same works on TikTok too.
Jordan B. Peterson.
Yeah, that's the guy. He is.
I used to be a fan of his back in the day. Oh my goodness.
Embarrassed. Well, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I had a different background than I did, so it's cool to see how far y'all have come, like, onto reality, and like it gives me hope seeing both y'all's stories of like coming from where you did to like be like really good people, like genuinely fighting for better things for the world now.
Thank you.
I think it's kind of like the whole Bill Maher, Dave Chappelle, and type of thing too. Because when you're growing up, these people are in their 30s and they kind of hold opposite views to like establishment Republicans. But now they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're so out of touch with how they used to be, because everyone used to think, oh, they're so progressive or Democrat or leftist or liberal. And it turns out now we're looking back and going and seeing all the problematic shit, like, oh, he's Islamophobic or he's transphobic. And now that they've started like having these more right-leaning views, it's kind of like, why did we ever listen to these old-ass people in the first place? Because, yeah, when we were teens, they made sense, but now that we're adults and have life experience and lived experience, it's like, they're just people that had a platform.
Yeah.
All right. Any final topics from the panel?
Let's talk about the Appalachian struggle for worker solidarity and the Blair Mountain incident, where we had to literally, West Virginia coal miners were so fed up with the working conditions, they donned red bandanas and said, we're not going back into the mine till we have a fair and equal pay system, and the mine owners literally called in the police and the army to fight them.
Was this
Over 100 people were arrested and over 100 people died.
Was this?
This is not recent news.
Not
This
recent.
is like
Okay,
historical event.
a piece of history. Okay, tell us more about it.
Labor history.
I don't have it pulled up, so I don't want to get like quote numbers or anything. But I do know like close to 1,000 people were arrested and close to 100 people were killed.
Was that the Blair Mountain incident?
Yes.
Yeah, the battle for Blair Mountain. I remember that. Battle for.
It's the largest armed uprising in the United States. It was about 10,000 West Virginia coal miners marched, and that's what started it. It's a lot of people. That is a lot of good came from it. Like the struggle that they went through brought about a lot of labor movement. Although it was very terrible how that situation ended, and a lot of people saw it in that day as a loss. Using that and moving forward as like a rallying cry has moved the labor like so much farther in a progressive way.
Yeah, 13,000 had gathered and began marching towards Logan County. Impatient to get to the fighting, miners near St. Albans in Kanawha County commandeered a Chesapeake and Ohio freight train renamed by the miners Blue Steel Special to meet up with the advance column of the marchers at Danville in Bone Country on their way to Bloody Mingo. During this time, Keeney and Mooney fled to Ohio, while the fiery Blitz Blizzard assumed quasi-leadership of the miners. Meanwhile, anti-Union Sheriff Chaffin had begun to set up defenses on Blair Mountain. He was supported financially by the Logan County Coal Operators Association, creating the nation's largest private armed force of nearly 2,000. So, 13,000 miners who are pissed off as hell versus 2,000 of a private army. The first skirmishes occurred in the morning of August 25th. The bulk of the miners were still 15 miles away. And the following day, President Warren G. Harding threatened to send federal troops and the Army Martin MB-1 bombers. After a long meeting in Madison, the seat of Boone County, the miners were convinced to return home, but the struggle was far from over. After spending days assembling his private army, Chaffin would not be denied the battle to end Union attempts at organizing in Logan County. Within hours of the Madison decision, rumors around Chaffin's men had shot Union sympathizers in the town of Sharpies, just north of Blair Mountain, and the families had been caught in the crossfire during the skirmishes. Infuriated, the miners turned back towards Blair Mountain, many traveling in their stolen and commandeered trains. By August 29th, the battle was fully joined. Chaf's men, though outnumbered, had the advantage of higher positions and better weaponry. Private planes were hired to drop homemade bombs on the miners, a combination of poison gas and explosive bombs left over from World War I were dropped in several locations near the town of Jeffrey, Sharpies, and Blair. At least one did not explode and was recovered by the miners. It was used months later to great effect as evidence for the defense during treason and murder trials. On orders from General Billy Mitchell, Army bombers from Maryland were also used for aerial surveillance. One Martin bomber crashed on its return flight, killing the 3 members of the crew. On August 30th, appointed by Colonel William U. Banks of West Virginia's National Guard to command the government and volunteer forces confronting the miners, sporadic gun battles continued for a week within the miners, at one time nearly breaking through the town of Logan and their target destinations, the non-unionized counties. To the south, Logan and Mingo, up to 30 deaths were reported by Chaffin's side and 50 to 100 on the Union miners' side, with hundreds more injured or wounded. Chaffin's forces consisted of 90 men from Beaufield, West Virginia, 40 from Hunton, West Virginia, and about 120 from West Virginia State Police. 3 of Chafin's forces, 2 volunteers, and a deputy sheriff were killed, and 1 miner was fatally wounded. This is a lot, and I'm only partially through, but I'm stopping here. After the battle, 185 miners were indicted for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, treason against the state of West Virginia. Though some were acquitted by sympathetic juries, others were imprisoned for years. The last paroled was in 1925. At Blizzard's trial, the unexploded bomb was used as evidence of the government and company's brutality, and he was acquitted.
Yep, that's one of the things I like to point to when people talk about like southern states and activism in southern states is like, even though a lot of counties swing red, there are a lot of pockets of people that are very liberal and have leftist views. And there's a term, the South is not a lost cause, and that's one of the things I really want to fight for, because there's a lot of people, like even in Richmond, people who were in Central Virginia would look at me from Southwest Virginia and go, "You're a hick. I would never go to anywhere where you're from. That's where the racism lives." And I'm just like, there's racism in Richmond. There's racism in Nova. There's racism everywhere. But you shouldn't just write off a whole group of people or a whole state or a whole section just because there is a influence of that there.
Our movement knows no state lines. Our movement knows no country lines. Our movement is an international movement, and it is a movement of the working class. It is a movement of the working people, and it is an intersectional movement. We need people from the inner cities. We need people from out in the boonies. We need people from as far north as north goes to as far south as south goes. We need people from the west. We need people from the east. We need people from the center. We need everybody. And we all got to stand together. We all got to work together. And I think that is a great spot to end our show for tonight. I want to thank all of my guests for coming on this evening. You were all wonderful. We had a great show tonight. For the audience, you can check back in next week for our next episode every single Monday, although these are now releasing on Wednesdays because of scheduling issues. However, once we get the streaming set up, which I think Gabriel is currently streaming on his end, hello to Gabriel's audience, we'll hopefully all be simultaneously streaming on Mondays at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every week. For any people in my audience, you can find all of my guests in the description down below. If you'd like to interact with any of my guests, or even more of the people I've done interviews with, you can join the Discord also down below. And with that, I will try to play our song again as an outro. I'll let everyone go ahead and quickly shout themselves out while the music is playing quietly in the background. Astro, how about you start us off?
Me on. I'm Astrofeminist. You guys can check me out on TikTok, and don't shop at Amazon or Starbucks until they let their workers unionize.
All right, Gabriel, you're up next. The music doesn't seem to be working.
I guess it isn't. But anyways, I am GW Jones on TikTok and Twitter now. And yeah,
there we go. A little bit late. It's scuffed, but we're making it work.
But yeah, look into organizing your workplace. It's Labor Day, so it's a great day to do that. The NLRB is a great place to start if you Google that, or just Google how to make a union. There's a lot of resources out there, and it's way easier than you think. So go check that out tonight.
All right, PK, sign us out.
I'm Dakota. Check me out at PKK Dakota. Give me a follow so I can be cool and go live like all of these people. Get registered to vote. And there is maps for Starbucks sip-ins where you just get to come and order a water or a simple drink and then chant for union rights and be disruptive. Cause anarchy. Cause chaos.
All right. And with that, we're going to end today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Thank you to all of my guests. And thank you to all of the listeners at home. And with that, you'll have a good night. Have a good evening.
Good night.